We're now just 7 hours from Trump's trade deadline as countries are trying to make deals with the United States or face significantly higher tariffs. Remember, President Trump in early April paused most of his so-called reciprocal tariffs, but time, as it does, moves ever forward and has brought us to the precipice of this new deadline, August 1st. Developments so far.
If you notice, he said so-called reciprocal tariffs, which to his credit is actually true. Right? A lot of the tariffs that are being implemented are actually better than reciprocal. The other countries are charging us 0 and we're still charging them 15, right? That's because we have the, we're the big pocketbooks and they want access to our markets. So they're willing to, eat something to get something. So let's see what Tapper has left to say about this.
Today, as the clock ticks toward midnight, Trump announced a 90-day pause on higher tariffs on Mexico. So tariffs will remain at 25% for Mexico instead of going up to 30% as threatened. And while Trump this week did lock down a majorly important trade agreement with the European Union, there are many other countries who, as of now, remain deal-less.
Of our 18 major trading partners, 2/3 of those trading partners have a deal. We've sent out 17 letters to countries around the world. And the rest of those countries that either do not have a deal or have a letter, they will be hearing from this administration by the midnight deadline tonight.
One major trading partner without a deal as of now is Canada. Trump saying on Truth Social today that Canada's decision to recognize a Palestinian state, quote, will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada. On the heels of this, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all closed down in the last hour as Trump seeks to close.
I mean, less than a percentage point. The NASDAQ is 0.03. Now, again, to be fair, Trump using the fact that Canada is going to recognize a Palestinian state, it's kind of a wedge issue, right? Because MAGA is very split on this, right? You have MAGA that's extremely pro-Israel. You have MAGA that is very pro-Palestine. So he didn't necessarily need to say that was the reason as to why that they can't make a deal. I don't understand what the point of that is. Maybe it's taken out of context. It wouldn't be surprising. But what you guys have to understand is that MAGA is not a monolith. Right, MAGA there are a lot of different ideas. There are a lot of different people. There are people that, for the most part, from my opinion, they try to think for themselves. They're not just pigeonholed into a particular issue, a particular topic. They can reason. They can be persuaded. If you bring them information, they can say, "Okay, I'll take a look at that." Like that's the majority of the people that I'm seeing on what I call my side, if anything. There are libertarians, there are right-wingers, there are harsh right-wingers, there are liberals. I mean, you look at Jimmy Dore, very popular podcaster. He was a TYT forever, and he's still, a socialist-esque kind of guy. But he knows that a lot of these things, and he bashes Trump when he needs to, when he feels he needs to. But there are other key issues that he understands that MAGA is along. On the side of certain issues and he's okay with that, and MAGA's okay with that. The more the merrier. Let's see. Let's see how this goes.
Close more trade deals. Can all of his tariffs survive the legal system? That's another question, because today a federal appeals court is hearing arguments in a major case arguing that Trump overstepped his legal authority, imposing many of his sweeping tariffs instead of Congress doing it. The lawsuit is brought by small businesses and represented by some very big shot attorneys, including a former acting U.S. Solicitor General who's going to join us in just a moment. But let's bring in CNN's resident tariff expert, Mr. Philip Mattingly. Phil, walk us through what 11th hour trade deals could still happen before deadline hits.
I think all eyes right now are on the Canada-U.S. relationship. Obviously, the president has made pretty clear that the optimism, or any optimism for a potential agreement, would seem to be minimal at this point in time. But with that 35% rate staring Canada in the face, officials say that there have been conversations between the two countries. How that actually plays out in the 7-ish hours we have until the deadline, I think, remains an open question. Also keeping an eye right now, obviously Mexico has been dealt with, he's given another 90 days with the tariffs that were already in place. China has another week before their delay needs to be extended. That extension is expected, but Trump hasn't actually weighed in yet. One of the interesting elements here, Jake, is even for the major partners that have made deals, and for the 150 plus other countries that are just waiting for some semblance of a sign about whether they're going to get a 10% universal tariff that Trump initially announced and was never delayed, or some other number, how it actually gets implemented. You heard the White House press secretary say, we'll call them before midnight. We'll let them know. The president actually has to sign something to put them into place at 12:01 a.m. I was talking to a major importer earlier, said it's a really messy time right now because a lot of these countries don't know what their rate will be, haven't been told anything from the administration. The rush of last-minute efforts to clinch deals with the president from delegations from other countries has actually made it a little bit of a more complicated process, given Trump a lot of leverage, but nobody's really sure how this is going to land by midnight.
But see, that's the point, right? They just glaze over that. The whole point of this, the whole point of getting to the end, the whole point of delaying, the whole point of a deadline is, in the end, Trump knows that the leverage only increases as time goes on, right? Because once these things are levied, once these things take hold, you're essentially shutting yourself out of the U.S. market, is what you're doing. So the threat is either come and play ball, or you can't sell to us anymore. And let's be honest, everyone wants to sell to us. Everything, always, right? We're the highest GDP. Listen, if you just Google the top companies as far as the amount that they're worth, I think it's something like of the $1 trillion plus. We have all the $1 trillion companies. There's not a single $1 trillion company in any other country in the world. So once you start looking at it, you just realize the leverage that he has. And then when you implement a deadline and you have these other deals that are being made, right? To glaze over, the EU making that deal. I mean, that was humongous, right? And then it was just before that, it was Japan, and it was just before. I mean, it's deal after deal. They're coming in. The calls are being made because they know once these tariffs go into effect, it is going to be mayhem for them. It's going to be a disaster. Every country knows this. Trump knows this. The media knows that. But they just want to kind of pretend and say, oh, he's doing. How else would you want him to play this? Right? You want him to kowtow to these countries that don't have a leg to stand on? It's stupid. That's what we've been doing for decades. Nancy Pelosi mentioned it 40 years ago, 30 years ago, when she was ranting and raving about tariffs and about Chinese imports. This has been an issue for a long time. And in my opinion, the Uniparty has coalesced behind big business and major corporations that are global. And they've just said, you know what? Yeah, they're just going to squeeze out the middle class, not really care. So what's happening now is a realignment. What's happening now is somebody who can negotiate, somebody that knows the leverage that they have to make a deal, is sitting down, playing hardball. These guys may not be used to it. They may not like it. But now that they see the other deals that are coming down, once you see the EU deal, you're not getting a better deal than that. If you're not a bigger economy than the EU, you're not getting a better deal than what they got. You're going to get the 15-cent tariff. And you're going to have to commit some type of investment. Maybe not the really poorer countries. Maybe Trump will be nice and just say, listen, we'll just give you a 15% tariff and you got to buy our stuff too. But we want zero. We want zero across the board. And you shouldn't worry about zero across the board, because even if you're a poorer country, the import's still going to cost more, right? Because you're going to have to, there's still shipping costs. There's all the other costs that are associated with getting goods and services over to you. So you have your area that you can produce stuff and you can do it well in. You're going to get the 15%. He laid down the groundwork now. That's like the baseline. It was 10%. They all should have taken the 10%. They all, played pussyfoot around it, and now they're going to get screwed. And it is what it is.
Yeah, the chaos, of course, is a feature, not a bug.
Absolutely.
Phil, what have been some of the practical effects of tariffs on big companies that we've seen so far? Earlier this week, we talked about Procter & Gamble raising prices, for example.
I think earnings season has been an enlightening moment for the actual impact that the tariffs can have on the corporate sector. I think from a price perspective, which is obviously what most in the audience would be most concerned about, we have seen the most vulnerable items that are the consumer-facing, electronics being the key in particular, autos as well, are areas where you're going to see price increases either already in place or you're starting to see them come over time. One of the interesting elements, Jake, is in talking to a lot of executives, particularly those in the wholesale retail industry, they say some of our members from trade groups have said some of their companies have held off, right? One, there's a lot of uncertainty. They didn't know where rates were actually going to land. But two, nobody wanted to kind of be captured under the eye of Sauron of the president or his Truth Social account and wanted to wait and see what was going to happen. At some point, many of these executives say, prices are going to have to increase. It's just natural. One thing to keep in mind, Fed Chairman Jay Powell yesterday said, we are still in the early stages of figuring out the actual effect here. The Trump administration believes the exporting countries will eat the majority of the tariffs. If they don't, then the companies will because of the value and leverage of the market. We're going to have to see how that plays out. There's no precedent for something like this And we haven't seen tariff rates, at least on net, this high since the 1930s.
What's the term that I've seen bandied about this week? Re-inflation? Is that what it's called? It has to do with the idea that inflation's going down, but now it might be going back up because of the tariffs.
It's been probably the biggest concern. It's also been one of the reasons you see Trump administration officials spiking the football right now of, hey, you all said there was going to be major jump in inflation. You all said there was going to be a recession. We haven't seen that at all. I think the concern right now is, again, I go back to Jay Powell on the Fed yesterday and also what the board kind of laid out as their analysis of the situation. There is an argument to be made that there will be a one-time price increase and then it will filter out through the system. There is also a concern, which is why the Fed has not raised rates, that this will be a far more durable increase in prices that may escalate over time. The biggest question I think that I have at this point is when you look at supply chains and how they actually work, are companies moving their supply chains? Are they relocating those supply chains? Are they going to run into major hiccups with those supply chains in the weeks and months ahead? Then you're talking about something like what we saw in the wake of COVID, maybe not to that scale.
Yeah.
This is very, very complicated, and I just think it's important to underscore that while the Trump administration is absolutely correct, there is a resilience to the U.S. economy, a resilience to the U.S. consumer. Consumer sentiment has certainly rebounded. The markets remain at all-time highs or around them, at least before today. There are concerns that have not necessarily been understood yet.
And that's the point, right? He just laid out all the good things, right? He essentially said, this is all the good things that are happening. The markets are high, inflation is down, unemployment is high. All the metrics, you just look at the number. You take a snapshot of the economy right now. It is booming, right? Our GDP is up. Everything's going well, right? The only thing that he can say and pivot to in the end as to what is going wrong is what can potentially go wrong. Guess what? That's always the case. That's always the case. If ever there's a scenario where somebody's doing well, it can be like, well, you're doing well now, but you might not be doing well later. Yeah, we know that, right? But we're worried about now. What is going on now? How is this affecting us now, right? Next 6 months, the next year. Okay, if things change the next year, then he'll get ire from his base over it, right? He'll figure it out then. He's got another 3.5 years left. If this thing shits the bed a year from now, I'm pretty sure he can pivot, move around, and move things around and kind of figure this out. But to the point that everyone in the global media space was saying that this was going to cause inflation, this was going to cause a recession, this was going to cause a downturn in the stock market, and that hasn't happened. Period. Hasn't happened. If anything, it's going the complete opposite way from what everyone was talking about prior to the tariffs being implemented. They were saying that, the Liberation Day was going to be the downfall of America. Our economic system was going to collapse. You got Bill Maher the other day admitting that, so far it seems like everybody on the media apparatus has been wrong. So far.
Also from when you sub for me, when we talk to the small business owners every day, a lot of these people have been trying to hold off and not raise prices or do layoffs, and they are now saying we have to do something in the next couple of months. So we could see lots of changes. Philip, always good to have you on. Thank you so much. Neil Kochel joins me now. He is the attorney for the small business plaintiffs in this lawsuit, arguing that Trump cannot use emergency powers to impose all these sweeping tariffs. He's also the former acting U.S. Solicitor General for President Obama. Neil, good to see you again. So back in May, your clients won this case in the Court of International Trade. Today, a panel of 11 appeals court judges in D.C. heard arguments. Some of them did seem skeptical of the Trump administration's arguments. Tell us what your argument is and what you thought the judges were, how they responded to your arguments.
Yeah, so I think this group is...
By the way, if you can, please subscribe to the channel. It really does me a lot of good. Small channel, trying to grow, helps out a lot. Subscribe button does cost absolutely nothing, but helps me out a lot. Thanks.
Small businesses that I and the Liberty Justice Center represent are saying, look, these tariffs are not something that the president can impose by his own say-so. They require Congress. That's where our Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 locates that power for the most important of reasons, Jake, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War and the idea that kings and presidents are always tempted to use tariffs and taxation. And here what Donald Trump has done is impose the largest tax increase on Americans since Bill Clinton in 1993, a tax increase of $1,300 per American family. And what we said today is, look, maybe that's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea, but that's something for Congress to decide, and no president has ever asserted the raw power to do this on his own.
With respect, Neil, Congress doesn't seem to care, right? I mean, Republicans control the House, the Republicans control the Senate. They seem perfectly willing just to hand over all their powers to President Trump on this issue and several others.
Yeah, that may be, but that's all the more reason why, if the president thinks this is so important and he needs it for leverage or negotiating authority and stuff like that, go to Congress and get it done. I mean, it's not like he's facing a Congress that's controlling.
Yeah, go to Congress and get it done. Other than the big beautiful bill, which has its many issues, right? Other than that, what has Congress done in the last 6 months? You like there's no way that he could get done what he's trying to do if everything had to be put in front of Congress. Now, that might be the right way to do it. You know, this might get litigated in the future, and they might come to future presidents and say, you can't do this. But as of now, this shit needs to get done because it's an absolute fucking mess. Sorry. But it is. So he's going to do what he needs to do to move the ball forward, and they can go to the courts all the hell they want, and good luck. But as of right now, it's already done. It's already implemented. The deals are already made. It's working. You got billions of dollars of tariff money pouring in. I wish that money was going down to pay the deficit and the debt. I wish that money was going down to pay the debt. That's not what it's being used for right now. It's you know, but at the end of the day, the money's coming in. How we choose to use that in the future, that's up for debate. That's, you know, we could figure that out down the road. But the money's coming in. These markets are opening up to us so that now our people can start selling a little bit more over there. It's going to help. It's going to help us tremendously. Again, as somebody who originally, you know, I was a very Milton Friedman, very free trade person, I can kind of see where the whole free trade thing has kind of been a sham in the past couple of decades, right? Because all these other countries have been extremely protectionist. And even though they didn't have the leverage to do that, we did. We didn't. We kept the quote unquote free trade model going, even though everybody else was tariffing the hell out of us. Time to balance, level the playing field here, especially being the country with the power, especially being the country with the markets.
Controlled by obstructionist Democrats or something. These are members of his own party, and yet he won't do it. Now, he tried in the first time he was president to get such legislation, and it failed. And I think that tells you all you need to know, which is this legislation will fail. And so you had the Trump attorney today, Jake, in court saying, well, if Congress doesn't like these tariffs, they can pass a law to remove them, which is not the way our constitutional system works. I mean, President Truman tried that with the seizure of the steel mills in 1952. He said to the Supreme Court, well, if Congress doesn't like it, they can pass a law. And the Supreme Court said, the Constitution requires Congress to act first, not the president.
So the Trump Justice Department argues there's no basis for the courts to review Trump's emergency declarations. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, the very first line of my argument today, Jake, was the Trump administration's argument boils down to simply this. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, for however long as I want, and the courts have no business reviewing what I'm doing. And, you know, that might be the law of some other country. It's certainly not the law of the United States.
The Trump administration also argues that the U.S. Supreme Court's recent decision tamping down universal injunctions by lower court judges means that the tariffs should not be blocked nationwide, even if tariffs are declared illegal. So what happens if Trump continues to lose the case in court, but he tries to use that logic to continue the tariffs until the U.S. Supreme Court, I guess, weighs in?
Yeah, that didn't really come up today. The Justice Department didn't push it, but I think for a good reason, because here, not just is this case brought by small businesses, who, as I say, are really teetering on the edge because of these tariffs, but it was also brought by 12 different states. And in that nationwide injunction ruling that the Supreme Court issued that you're referring to, they said when states bring cases, it may be different. And that makes sense. Like, you know, like Oregon is one of the plaintiff states here. If they win their case, you get lower tariffs in Oregon, but not in Wyoming. Like, that just seems unworkable. And the Constitution itself has a uniformity requirement over tariffs.
So that's that when it comes to that.
Spiking the football right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, they're going to cry about it, and you know, and once you kind of get through the noise, especially on the previous guest, once you kind of get through the noise and you kind of see the arguments that they're making, all they have is things are going really well, but they might not be soon at some point in the future. So that's a really good sign. Really good sign, guys. I mean, you have to admit that if this is all, you know, talking heads and CNN have in their arsenal when it comes to this, it's basically giving him a win. So this is a win. Checkmate on Trump for this for now. You know, a lot of other things that are looming around, causing a lot of noise. It's a very noisy news cycle, right? There's a lot of stuff in the air. You know, especially with the Epstein thing, that seems to be just sizzling right now, which I'm glad. I'm glad that that's starting to. It's not going to fizzle. It's not going to fizzle, but you don't want it to boil over, right? You just want to keep that at a nice, you know, rolling boil. You don't want everything to you don't want the oil to spill out and cause a big flame. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Please follow me on 6283 Talk on the X. Hit that subscribe button if you like, so you get notifications for when future videos come out, and I will see you again on the next one. Thanks a lot.